Hi guys, today we are going to discuss on cell history and different types of microscopes. Okay, then before moving on to the topic, try to answer my question. What is the smallest bacteria that is present in the world? If you don't know the answer, then do watch this video completely to know it. Okay guys, tell me what is the smallest part of any living thing that still counts as being alive? Let's say we are cutting a mango into smaller and smaller pieces. Tell me, is there a point at which what is left is no longer alive? As you see here, there is such a limit. This tiniest living part that cannot be cut still has the structure and function of that particular mango we call as cell. Okay guys, then let's define the cell in three different forms. It is the structural and functional unit of the organism. It stands as the lowest level of organization, and it is the building block of the organism that forms the organism and also performs all the vital activities of it. Okay, let's go to the history of this cell. Who first time identified this particular cell? It all started in back of the days 1665. An Englishman, Robert Hooke, he made a small simple microscope to look at the thin slice of a cork, which is a plant bark. Under that microscope, cork seemed to be made of thousands of tiny empty chambers that made him fascinated, and he called them as cells. But we know that living cells, they are not empty chambers. They do contain many of the working parts, tiny parts that has their specific functions. So then who discovered actually the living cell first time? That has been observed by Anton von Leeuwenhoek when he examined a sample of pond water. He also drew the organisms that he saw in the mouth. Now we call that one as bacteria. Soon after Leeuwenhoek, observations made by many other scientists made it clear that cells were the basic units of life. Out of those discoveries, three main ones are Schleiden. He conducted experiment and concluded that all plants are made of cells. Then followed by Schwann. He stated that all animals were made of cells. Then finally, Virchow conducted experiment and concluded that new cells could be produced only from the pre-existing cells. That means division of the existing cells. So these three discoveries are summarized as cell theory, the most fundamental concept of biology. So what is cell theory? The cell theory is proposed by those three scientists, Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow, and they made three main points. The first one is all living things are made of cells. Then second is cells are the basic units of structure and function in the living organisms. Then new cells are produced from existing cells. So this is a very important fundamental aspect of the cell theory. Since the cell is too small, we can't see with our naked eye. We need to use the microscope to observe that. The reason behind this having the small size for the cell is our cell guy has got the biggest task of receiving as well as transporting the materials within the cell and in and out of the cell. So the smaller is the size, the more is the efficiency in doing that particular function. So let's take an analogy comparing the large cell to that of the small cells. Assume that this particular organism is made with one single large cell. It has volume and it has surface area. Surface area is these 6 sites, whatever the area, that is where materials will go in and out of the cell, right? Assume that I have cut this particular organism, large cell, that means into thin slices like this. And the same organism, now it is made with these 6 slices of that particular large cell. Now what happens to the volume of this particular one? It is the same because we did not change the volume of that, the same large cell. But what we have changed now? The surface area for each block, each slice is more compared to that of the total large cell. That means the smaller is the pieces, the more is the efficient way of transportation of the materials, since the surface area is more compared to that of the large single cell. So now, what do you think the best efficient way? To have one large cell as a total organism, or to have tiny small pieces as cells to make up that organism? Which is the efficient way? Definitely the smaller are the bits and parts, the more efficient way. So that particular bits and parts of the organism that has structure and function, we call them as cells. So now it's time for the quiz question, guys. The smallest known living organisms belong to a group of bacteria called Mycoplasmas. Some of the bacteria in this family, they measure only about 150 nanometer wide. They are actually smaller than some viruses. Viruses cannot be considered as living things since they will be functionable only after invading the host cells. So now regarding these mycoplasmas, there are 90 different varieties out there. Some they infect animals, some plants and other insects. For human beings, almost 14 varieties are known that causes some drastic diseases.